At the University of South Carolina, O.J. Simpson thrived as a successful football player. Touchdown after touchdown, Simpson amazed the nation with his succession in the sport. He moved his succession in college football to the Buffalo Bills, which then mistakenly traded him with the 49ers. His final game with the 49ers was on December 16, 1997, a 31-21 loss to the Atlanta Falcons. After football, Simpson decided to move towards acting. During his career, he met his wife, Nicole Brown, at a nightclub. Their relationship grew until 1994. On June 12, 1994, Nicole Brown and her friend, Ron Goldman, were both found brutally stabbed to death in front of her condo in L.A. Simpson's arrest and trial were among the most televised events in American history, changing the nation for decades to come. This is what America still remembers and how it's still affecting those who lived through it. 3 citizens who participated in being invested with the trial were brought to be interviewed about how this trial affected their lives. Here are their stories.
So, in 1995, I was 21 years old, and I heard about it while I was at work.
I was 32 years old, and I don't exactly remember, but I'm assuming I was at work.
So I would have been 32. I was attending my grandmother's funeral.
Before the trial, O.J. Simpson was an American icon. Everybody loved him. He was a movie star, he was on commercials, everybody loved him, including me. It was very, very clear that he did it. However, he had the money to hire the best lawyers essentially in the world, and they were able to get him found not guilty.
The arguments were made was that because of his past football injuries, that he was not physically strong and able to, act violently and overpower his victims. So I think that was the biggest argument that he was trying to use. I don't think it was a strong one. The guy was a pro athlete, so.
The strongest parts of OJ's case was his defense team did a very good job picking apart the prosecutors. They went after the prosecutors' personal lives and brought those lives to the media and made them look very uncredible and not capable of prosecuting. They completely overlooked the physical evidence.
The mountain of evidence against him. There was DNA evidence of his blood everywhere.
He had a history of domestic abuse and arguments that had been witnessed by other people with Nicole. I think that was the strongest evidence against him.
He was America's, kind of sweetheart. He could do nothing wrong. When somebody that has that good of a reputation is arrested for double murder, that keeps your attention.
It was just everywhere, it was on the news every single night, and it was in the papers, everybody was talking about it. So things like that usually weren't as widely advertised and out there in the past. So that's, you couldn't avoid it.
It was all over the media. You couldn't get away from it. It was on every channel, every single day. And back then, there wasn't as much social media. It was all television, newspapers, magazines. You couldn't get away from it. Radio. It was everywhere. You turn on anything electronic, and they would be talking about the case. You couldn't not stay invested. This was O.J. Simpson, a an amazing football star who had turned actor, and he was a businessman. It was such a high profile case, and it was so brutal. It was one of those cases where it was a train wreck. You could not look at it. It was just that horrific. It pulled you in.
Well, he was a popular athlete, and he was very much liked. So I think there's, people gave him the benefit of the doubt, right? So when you're liked, people think, well, they couldn't do something bad like that.
They made him look like a super clean, squeaky clean guy, Heisman Trophy winner, football legend. They made him look like he was just not capable of committing such a crime.
To me, it was awesome. There was never a case that was on TV like this. So I was able to follow a childhood hero from the time he got arrested until the time he was found not guilty.
It changed the role of media in reporting to entertaining.
That was not right. It should not have been given as much publicity as it did, because it really it swayed people's views because of how the media presented it.
I think there was two things. One was his popularity, and we already touched upon how he was liked, and he was a popular individual from his, past, when he was a football player, pro football player. And then I think the other thing is too that the officer, and his name slips my mind, but the arresting officer was painted to be racist, and there was a case made that the Los Angeles police as a whole were racist and biased. So you had a popular athlete, and then you had a perception of racism in the law enforcement side.
It was the first time in American history that we were able to see the inner workings of a very high profile case from beginning to end. And it wasn't a nobody, it was one of the most famous people on earth. And he also had the ability to have the greatest team of attorneys on it. So you bring all of this stuff together, and it just captivated everybody involved.
Well, it's a couple different levels. Number one, it was, rich people involved, right? And usually that in the past, those types of things were handled outside of the public eye, wasn't made public and air your dirty laundry to everybody. And I think also the whole racial aspect of it, it was really the start, the first time I could remember the start of allegations of primarily white law enforcement against African Americans. So that's why I think it was pivotal. And then the third thing, like I said, is, I've said twice now, is the media's role, I think, changed, or their perceived role changed from news reporting to entertainment.
Because 2 people were brutally murdered, and a defense team was able to dissect so precisely the prosecutors that there was not a fair trial. It just was not, the evidence did not seem to be presented in the proper light. It was overlooked because of how they discredited the prosecutor.